Picture this. You're huddled in the backseat of your old Honda Civic in a resort parking lot, watching your wealthy relatives sip champagne through floor-to-ceiling windows, while they've just told you there's no room for you at the family reunion. The irony? You actually own every single brick of that luxury resort they're staying in. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is just letting people show you exactly who they are. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Rocky Mountains stretched endlessly beyond the windshield of my beat-up Honda as I pulled into the circular driveway of Pinehaven Mountain Resort. Even after all these years, the sight of the place still took my breath away. Towering pine trees framed the rustic yet elegant lodge, with its stone facade and warm amber lights glowing against the twilight sky. This was where the Romano family held their annual reunion, a tradition that went back 3 generations. What they didn't know was that I, Cassandra Romano, the family disappointment, the one they whispered about at Christmas dinners, now owned every inch of this mountain paradise. I'd been planning this moment for 18 months, ever since I'd quietly purchased the resort through my holding company, Romano Holdings LLC. The previous owners had been struggling financially, and I'd swooped in with a cash offer they couldn't refuse. The staff had been sworn to confidentiality, and I'd made sure my real identity remained buried under layers of corporate paperwork. To everyone at Pinehaven, I was just C. Romano, the mysterious new owner who preferred to operate from the shadows. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Danny. "Cass, you coming up this weekend? Mom said you haven't confirmed yet." I stared at the message, remembering last year's reunion. The snide comments about my thrift store clothes, the way conversations died when I approached, the casual cruelty disguised as concern. "Oh, Cassandra's having another rough patch," Aunt Louise had whispered to Victoria, not bothering to lower her voice. "Still waiting tables," I heard. Such a shame, really. What they didn't know was that while they saw a struggling waitress, I'd been quietly building an empire. After my parents died in that car accident 5 years ago, leaving me with nothing but debt and a fierce determination to prove myself, I'd taken their small life insurance payout and invested every penny. Real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency before it exploded. I'd worked 16-hour days, lived on ramen noodles, and sacrificed everything social for financial freedom. My investment firm, Mountain Vista Properties, now managed over $50 million in assets. I pulled up to the resort's main entrance, where a familiar figure in a crisp burgundy uniform approached my car. Marcus Chen had been the resort manager for 8 years, and when I'd bought the place, he'd been the first person I'd confided in. He was discreet, professional, and had become something of a friend over the past year and a half. "Ms. Romano," he said quietly, opening my car door. "Everything is prepared as requested. Your family checked in this afternoon. They've taken the entire East Wing, just as they do every year." I stepped out, smoothing down my simple black dress. Nothing too fancy, nothing that would raise suspicions. Tonight, I was still just Cassandra, the waitress to them. "Any issues with the arrangements?" Marcus's expression tightened slightly. "Your Aunt Victoria was quite demanding about the room assignments. She specifically requested that your accommodation be downgraded. She said there had been a miscommunication about the booking." My jaw clenched. Even here, even at what they thought was a neutral venue, Victoria couldn't resist her power plays. She'd been the self-appointed matriarch of the Romano family since my grandmother passed, controlling the family trust, deciding who was worthy of respect and who wasn't. Growing up, she'd made it clear that I was in the latter category. "What exactly did she request?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "She said there wasn't enough room in the main lodge for everyone, and suggested you might be more comfortable in the overflow accommodations." The overflow accommodations. That was a polite way of saying the staff quarters in the basement, or worse, being told to find alternate lodging entirely. The Romano family had been coming here so long, they felt entitled to make demands about who stayed where, treating the resort like their personal vacation home. I see. I took a deep breath, centering myself. This was exactly the kind of behavior I'd expected, and honestly, it was perfect for what I had planned. And you told them? Exactly what you instructed, that we'd need to check availability and get back to them. I haven't confirmed or denied anything yet. Smart man. I'd specifically asked Marcus to let me handle any special requests from my family personally. I wanted to see just how far they'd push their entitlement. As we walked toward the entrance, I caught glimpses of familiar faces through the massive lobby windows. There was Bradley, Victoria's golden boy, probably regaling everyone with stories about his latest business acquisition. Natalie was there too, dripping in jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. Her husband Richard nodding along to whatever expensive hobby she was describing this week. The lobby was exactly as I remembered it, but now I saw it through different eyes. The hand-carved wooden beams that I'd had restored last spring. The Italian marble flooring that had cost a fortune to repair after water damage. The massive stone fireplace where a small crowd of Romanos were already gathering for cocktails before dinner. Every detail, every luxury they were enjoying was mine. Isabella Torres, the head concierge, approached with a warm smile. She was one of the few staff members who knew my true identity, and we'd worked together to ensure this weekend went exactly as planned. "Good evening, Ms. Romano," she said quietly. "Your room is ready, but I should mention that your aunt has been asking questions about management. She seems to want to speak with whoever's in charge about the booking situation." Perfect. Victoria couldn't help herself. She had to be in control, had to make sure everyone knew she was the important one, the one with influence and connections. What she didn't realize was that she was about to run headfirst into a wall. She couldn't move. "Let her ask," I said. "In fact, encourage it. Tell her the owner will be available to speak with her personally tomorrow evening." Izzy's eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief. She'd heard enough of my family stories over the past year to understand exactly what was happening here. I made my way through the lobby, keeping my head down, hoping to reach the elevator without being noticed. No such luck. "Cassandra!" The voice was sharp, commanding, unmistakably Victoria's. I turned to see her approaching, resplendent in what I recognized as a designer cocktail dress that probably cost more than I used to make in 3 months. She looked exactly the same as always. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, makeup applied with professional precision, and that expression of barely concealed disappointment that she reserved especially for me. "Aunt Victoria," I said, forcing a smile. "You look wonderful." She looked me up and down, taking in my simple dress, my modest jewelry, my practical shoes. "I was just speaking with the concierge about your room situation. It seems there's been some confusion. Here it comes." I braced myself for the familiar ritual of being made to feel small, unwanted, like an inconvenience that the family had to tolerate out of obligation. "Oh?" I kept my voice neutral, curious. "Well, you see, we've had the same arrangement for years. The family takes the East Wing, and it's always worked perfectly. But apparently, there's been some sort of booking error, and they're saying they might not have space for everyone." She paused, waiting for me to interject, to apologize, to offer to find somewhere else to stay. When I remained silent, she continued. "Now, I don't want you to feel bad about this, dear, but I think it might be best if you looked into alternative accommodations for tonight. There's a lovely little motel about 20 minutes down the mountain. I'm sure it would be much more suitable for your budget anyway." The words hit exactly as they were intended to. In front of the family, in front of the other resort guests, she was politely but firmly disinviting me from my own property. The assumption that I couldn't? afford to stay here, that I didn't belong in the same space as the rest of them, was so casually cruel it took my breath away. But instead of hurt, I felt something else entirely. A calm, cold satisfaction. She was giving me exactly what I needed. "You know what, Aunt Victoria?" I said, my voice steady. "You're absolutely right. I think alternative arrangements would be perfect." Her eyebrows rose slightly. She'd clearly expected more resistance, more pleading. "Wonderful. I'm glad you're being so reasonable about this. The family will appreciate not having any awkwardness this weekend." Awkwardness. As if my presence was inherently problematic, something that needed to be managed and contained. "Of course," I agreed. "I wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable." Victoria's smile was triumphant, satisfied. She'd maintained the family hierarchy, put me in my place, established the natural order of things. In her mind, this was how it should be. The successful, important Romanos in the luxury suites, and poor Cassandra relegated to whatever scraps were available. As she walked away, probably to inform the others about how graciously she'd handled the accommodation crisis, I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. "Change of plans. I'll be staying in my car tonight. Make sure security knows it's fine and doesn't disturb me." His response came immediately. "Are you certain? I can arrange something much more comfortable." Positive. This is exactly how it needs to happen. Because the truth was, spending the night in my car wasn't a humiliation. It was strategy. Tomorrow evening, when the entire Romano family was gathered for their traditional final dinner, when they were all comfortable and confident in their assumed superiority, I was going to stand up in front of all of them and reveal exactly who owned the ground they were standing on. I walked back outside into the cool mountain air and opened the back door of my Honda. I'd actually prepared for this possibility, packing a sleeping bag and pillow just in case Victoria's cruelty reached exactly these heights. As I settled into the back seat, I could see into the resort's main dining room, where my family was already gathering for cocktails and appetizers. There was Bradley, holding court at the center of a group, probably talking about his latest real estate development. Natalie was showing off what looked like a new bracelet to a cluster of female cousins. Uncle Frank was at the bar, gesturing animatedly while telling some story. They were all there, all comfortable, all blissfully unaware that their poor relation was currently lying in the parking lot, watching them through the windows of her own resort. My phone buzzed with texts from a few of the younger cousins. Danny again. "Hey, where are you? Didn't see you at cocktails." And from his sister Maria. "Cass." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Come find us. We're at the bar." The younger generation had always been kinder. They remembered playing together as kids, before the family politics and financial hierarchies had fully set in. But even they had been influenced over the years by the older relatives' attitudes. I'd watched them become more distant, more polite, more careful around me as we'd all gotten older. I texted back something vague about being tired and catching up with everyone tomorrow. Let them think I was in my room. Let them assume I'd meekly accepted whatever accommodation Victoria had arranged for me. As the night deepened and the lobby slowly emptied, I allowed myself to think about tomorrow, about the moment when I would stand up at the farewell dinner and make my announcement. I'd practiced the words in my mirror at home, but somehow, lying here in my car, they felt more real. I want to thank you all for coming to this year's reunion. I hope you've enjoyed your stay at Pinehaven Mountain Resort. Some of you have asked to speak with management about various concerns, and I'm happy to address those now. You see, I am the management. I'm the owner. I bought this place 18 months ago, and every service you've enjoyed, every luxury you've experienced, every beautiful view you've admired, it's all been my gift to you. I imagined Victoria's face. The shock, the confusion, the dawning realization that the niece she'd just forced to sleep in a car actually owned the resort where she'd been making demands and throwing her weight around. The irony was perfect. They'd spent years treating me like I was nothing, like I was a burden to be tolerated, a failure to be pitied. And all the while, I'd been building something they couldn't even imagine. Not just wealth, but the specific kind of power that would allow me to turn their own weapon against them. As I drifted off to sleep in my Honda, wrapped in my sleeping bag with the resort's warm lights glowing through the windows, I smiled. Tomorrow night, the entire Romano family was going to learn that sometimes the person you look down on is actually the one looking down on you. I woke to the sound of car doors slamming and familiar voices carrying across the parking lot. The sun was just beginning to peek over the mountain peaks, casting long shadows across the resort grounds. Through my slightly fogged windows, I could see several of my relatives heading toward the hiking trails, dressed in expensive outdoor gear that probably cost more than my car. "Did you see Cassandra last night?" I heard Natalie's voice, sharp and clear in the morning air. "Victoria said she couldn't even afford to stay in the resort, had to find some cheap motel down the mountain. Honestly, it's embarrassing," came Bradley's response. "Every year it's the same thing. She shows up looking like she shops at thrift stores, can barely contribute to the group dinners, and now she can't even manage basic accommodations. At what point do we stop enabling this?" I remained perfectly still in my backseat, hardly breathing. This was exactly the kind of conversation I'd suspected happened when I wasn't around, but hearing it so bluntly still stung. The casual cruelty of it, the way they discussed my supposed financial struggles like I was a charity case they were tired of supporting. "Maybe we should have a family discussion about expectations," Natalie continued. "I mean, these reunions cost money. If she can't participate at the same level as everyone else, maybe she shouldn't come." They moved on toward the trail, their voices fading, but their words echoed in my mind. Expectations, participation at the same level. They wanted to price me out of my own family, make attendance at reunions contingent on wealth. The Romano family reunion as an exclusive club for the financially successful only. I waited until they were completely out of sight before emerging from my car, stretching muscles that had cramped from sleeping in such a confined space. My reflection in the car window showed exactly what they expected to see: someone who'd spent the night in uncomfortable circumstances, looking a bit rumpled and tired. Perfect. Marcus appeared almost immediately, approaching with a discreet coffee service on a silver tray. "Good morning, Ms. Romano. I thought you might need this." The coffee was perfect, rich, and hot, served in the resort's finest china. For a moment, I allowed myself to appreciate the absurdity of the situation. Here I was, drinking premium coffee from porcelain that I owned, while my family assumed I was probably scrounging for quarters to buy gas station coffee. "Any interesting developments overnight?" I asked. Marcus's expression grew carefully neutral. "Your Aunt Victoria has requested a meeting with resort management this morning. Apparently there were several issues with the service last night that she feels need to be addressed." Of course there were. Victoria couldn't simply enjoy a vacation. She had to find problems, had to establish her importance by complaining and making demands. It was a pattern I'd observed my entire life. She needed to be the center of attention, the one whose opinions mattered most. What kind of issues? The wine selection at dinner wasn't up to her standards. She felt the server was insufficiently attentive to the Romano party's needs, and she's particularly upset about the booking confusion regarding your accommodation. She wants to ensure it doesn't happen again next year. I nearly laughed. Victoria was complaining about service at my own resort, demanding better treatment for a family that included the actual owner. But more than that, she was already planning next year, already assuming she had the authority to dictate how future bookings would be handled. "Schedule the meeting for this afternoon," I said. "Tell her the owner will be available to discuss her concerns personally." "Should I mention that the owner will be you?" "Absolutely not. Let it be a surprise." As Marcus walked away, I caught sight of Isabella approaching from the main entrance. She moved with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she had news to share. "Your cousin Danny has been asking about you," she said quietly. "He seems genuinely concerned. He came to the front desk this morning asking if we'd seen you, wondering if you'd actually left last night." This didn't surprise me. Danny had always been different from the rest of the family. 3 years younger than me, he'd looked up to me when we were kids, before the family dynamics had fully poisoned our relationship. Even now, he maintained a kind of stubborn loyalty that his parents and aunts found exasperating. "What did you tell him?" "That guest privacy policies prevent us from discussing individual accommodations, but that all registered guests were welcome to use the resort facilities." Smart answer. Technical and professional, but it left room for interpretation. Danny would probably assume I was staying somewhere on the property, just not in the main family block. "There's something else," Isabella continued. "I overheard a conversation at the concierge desk. Your Aunt Victoria was asking about the resort's ownership structure. She wanted to know if there might be some way to arrange a permanent family discount, given how long the Romanos have been coming here." My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. Even here, even as a guest, Victoria was trying to leverage the family name for special treatment. She was operating under the assumption that the Romano family business was important enough, influential enough, that the resort would want to curry favor with them. Did she mention specifics? She suggested that the Romano Family Trust might be interested in making an investment in the property. Something about how it would be mutually beneficial, given the family's long history with Pinehaven. The Romano Family Trust. I knew that trust intimately, had watched Victoria control it like her personal kingdom for years. When my grandmother had established it, the intention had been to provide security for all the Romano descendants. In practice, Victoria had used it as a tool of control, determining who received support and who didn't, based on her personal approval. I'd never received a penny from that trust. Every time I'd needed help, every financial crisis I'd faced after my parents died, Victoria had found reasons why I didn't qualify. Too irresponsible with money, too unstable in my career choices, too likely to squander the family resources on poor decisions. Now she wanted to use that same trust to buy into my resort. The irony was breathtaking. "Schedule her for the ownership meeting as well," I told Isabella. "If she wants to discuss investment opportunities with the owner, she should have that chance." As the morning progressed, I made myself visible around the resort, but carefully. I used the hiking trails, ate breakfast at the small cafe near the spa, spent time reading by the pool. To any casual observer, I looked like exactly what my family thought I was. Someone making the best of limited circumstances, taking advantage of the resort's public spaces while clearly not staying in the main accommodation areas. The performance was deliberate. Every time I encountered a family member, I made sure to seem slightly uncomfortable, slightly out of place. When Natalie waved at me from across the pool deck, I waved back but didn't approach. When Uncle Frank called out a greeting, I smiled and nodded, but kept walking. I was present but peripheral, visible but not quite belonging. Around noon, I witnessed a scene that crystallized everything I'd been feeling about my family for years. I was sitting in the resort's library tucked into a corner chair with a book when Bradley and Richard entered, apparently looking for a quiet place to discuss business. "The quarterly reports look good," Bradley was saying, "but I think we need to be more strategic about the family trust distributions. Some of the beneficiaries aren't really contributing anything meaningful." "You're talking about Cassandra," Richard said. It wasn't a question. Among others. "Look, I understand family loyalty, but at some point we have to think about return on investment." The trust was meant to help family members build something, not just provide endless charity to people who can't get their lives together. I gripped my book tighter, fighting the urge to stand up and confront them right there. They were talking about cutting me out of family financial support that I'd never actually received anyway. But more than that, they were talking about me like I was a burden, a drain on family resources. Victoria's been saying the same thing. Richard continued. Maybe it's time to restructure the beneficiary requirements, make them performance-based. If someone can't demonstrate financial stability or career success, maybe they shouldn't qualify for distributions. Financial stability, career success. They wanted to make family belonging conditional on wealth, on meeting their standards of achievement. The fact that I'd built my own fortune, that I was probably more financially successful than any of them, made their conversation even more galling. But it also gave me an idea. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Marcus. I want to make an addition to this afternoon's meeting. Can you have our accountant prepare a presentation on the resort's financial performance? Revenue, profit margins, occupancy rates, the works. His response came quickly. Of course. Any particular focus? I want them to understand exactly how successful this property is and how much it's worth. Because if my family wanted to judge people based on financial achievement, they were about to get a masterclass in exactly what that looked like. The afternoon meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock in the resort's private conference room. I spent the intervening hours preparing, not just mentally but physically. I changed into my best outfit, a tailored blazer and dress that I'd bought specifically for important business meetings. I styled my hair and applied makeup with the same care I used for investor presentations. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see poor Cassandra anymore. I saw Romano, successful businesswoman and resort owner. I arrived at the conference room early, taking a seat at the head of the polished wooden table. Marcus had prepared everything perfectly. Financial documents laid out with precision, a presentation queued up on the wall-mounted screen, coffee service arranged on the sideboard. To anyone entering, it would be immediately clear that this was a serious business meeting. Victoria arrived precisely on time, accompanied by Bradley. They were both dressed for what they clearly thought would be a complaint session with some mid-level resort manager, someone they could intimidate or charm into giving them what they wanted. The moment they saw me sitting at the head of the table, confusion flickered across both their faces. Cassandra? Victoria's voice carried a note of surprise mixed with annoyance. What are you doing here? We're supposed to be meeting with management. Please have a seat, I said calmly, gesturing to the chairs across from me. We have quite a bit to discuss. Bradley remained standing, looking around the room as if expecting the real meeting participants to enter at any moment. Is this some kind of mistake? We asked to speak with whoever's in charge about the accommodation issues. No mistake, I replied. I am whoever's in charge. The silence that followed was profound. I could see both of them trying to process what I just said, their faces cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first hints of understanding. Victoria recovered first, her expression hardening into the familiar mask of authority she'd worn my entire life. Cassandra, this isn't funny. We don't have time for games. We have legitimate concerns that need to be addressed by someone with actual authority. I understand you wanted to discuss the Romano family's relationship with Pinehaven Mountain Resort, I continued, ignoring her dismissal. I'm very interested in hearing your concerns. After all, as the owner of this property, your satisfaction is important to me. The word owner hung in the air like a physical presence. Bradley's mouth actually fell open slightly. Victoria's composure cracked for just a moment before she reasserted control. Owner? She repeated, her voice sharp with skepticism. Cassandra, what exactly are you trying to say? Instead of answering directly, I picked up a remote and activated the wall screen. The first slide appeared. Pinehaven Mountain Resort. Property of Romano Holdings, LLC. I purchased this resort 18 months ago, I said matter-of-factly. It's been a very successful investment. Would you like to see the financial projections? The next slide showed revenue charts, occupancy, rates, profit margins, all impressive, all mine. Victoria stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. This is impossible. You're a waitress. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive a 15-year-old car. I did work as a waitress, I acknowledged. It was excellent market research for the hospitality industry. And yes, I drive an older car and live modestly. It's amazing how much you can invest when you're not spending money on designer clothes and luxury cars. Bradley found his voice. How could you possibly afford something like this? Do you have any idea what a property like this costs? I clicked to the next slide. The purchase agreement, with the price clearly visible. $7.2 million. Cash purchase? I started with our parents' life insurance money, I said quietly. Everything I've built has grown from that foundation. Real estate investments, stock portfolios, cryptocurrency holdings. My firm, Mountain Vista Properties, manages just over $50 million in assets currently. The number seemed to physically stagger them. Victoria sank into her chair, staring at me like I was a stranger. $50 million, Bradley repeated slowly. You're saying you're worth $50 million? The firm manages $50 million. My personal net worth is somewhat higher. Another silence, this one different from the first. This was the silence of people realizing that everything they thought they knew was wrong. But why? Victoria's voice was smaller now, uncertain. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why let us think? Think what? I asked gently. That I was poor? That I was struggling? That I needed your help? I paused, letting the implications settle. You never offered help, Aunt Victoria. You made it clear that I wasn't worthy of family support. You restructured trust distributions to exclude me. You've spent years treating me like a charity case you were tired of supporting. The truth of it was written across both their faces. They remembered every slight, every dismissive comment, every time they'd made me feel small and insignificant. Yesterday, you told me I should find accommodations more suitable to my budget, I continued. You were embarrassed to have me stay in the same space as the rest of the family. You wanted me gone, removed from sight so I wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Victoria's perfect composure was completely gone now. She looked older, smaller, diminished. Cassandra, I never meant. We didn't realize. You didn't realize because you never asked. You never wondered why I was always working, always busy, always unavailable for family events. You assumed I was failing, and that assumption made it easy to treat me like I was expendable. Bradley leaned forward, and I could see his mind working, calculating. Always the businessman, he was already trying to figure out the angles, the opportunities. This changes things, he said slowly. With this kind of success, this kind of wealth, you could be a major contributor to family initiatives. The trust could benefit enormously from your expertise. And there it was, the instant recalibration. Now that they knew I had money, I was suddenly valuable again. Now I could be a contributor instead of a burden. You want me to contribute to the trust? I asked. The same trust that Victoria has used to exclude me for years? The trust that was supposed to support all Romano descendants, but somehow never had room for me? Neither of them answered. I have a different proposal, I said. Since you mentioned that family belongings should be performance-based, based on financial achievement and career success, let's make that official. Let's restructure the Romano family relationships based on actual contribution and success rather than assumptions and inherited status. I could see fear creeping into Victoria's eyes. She was beginning to understand that the power dynamic had shifted fundamentally, irreversibly. What are you suggesting? She asked quietly. I'm suggesting that from now on, respect is earned, not assumed. That family support flows to those who actually need it, not those who demand it. and that nobody gets to sleep in parking lots while their relatives enjoy luxury accommodations on their own property. The meeting continued for another hour, covering logistics and practical matters, but the real conversation was over. The fundamental truth had been established. The family failure, the disappointing niece, the one they'd been embarrassed by and dismissive of, was now the most successful Romano of her generation. As Victoria and Bradley left the conference room, both looking shell-shocked and uncertain, I remained seated at the head of the table. Tomorrow night's dinner was going to be very different from what any of them expected. But first, I had one more day to let them process this new reality. One more day to let the implications sink in before I made my announcement to the entire family. The real revelation was still to come. The next morning brought an entirely different energy to the resort. Word had clearly spread about something significant happening, though I suspected Victoria and Bradley hadn't shared the full truth with the rest of the family. Instead, there seemed to be a strange undercurrent of whispers and sideways glances whenever I appeared in common areas. I was having breakfast at the Terrace restaurant when Danny finally approached me directly. Unlike the others, he looked genuinely concerned rather than curious or calculating. "Cass, can we talk?" He pulled out the chair across from me without waiting for an invitation. "Mom said something weird happened yesterday, but she's being really vague about it, and Victoria looks like someone died." I studied my cousin's face. Danny had always been the most genuine member of our generation, the one who'd maintained his childhood kindness even as family politics had complicated everything else. If anyone deserved honesty, it was him. "What exactly did your mom tell you?" "Just that you'd been involved in some kind of meeting with resort management, and that there were complications about accommodations and family expectations." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "But she had this look, like when we were kids and someone had done something that was going to get them in huge trouble, but she wasn't sure whether to warn them or let them face the consequences." That sounded exactly like Aunt Louise. She'd always been the family mediator, trying to smooth over conflicts without actually addressing the underlying issues. "Danny, can I ask you something?" I set down my coffee cup and leaned forward. "What do you actually know about my life? I mean, beyond what the family talks about at gatherings." He looked surprised by the question. "I know you work in restaurants. I know you've had some tough times since Uncle Mike and Aunt Sarah died. I know you live alone and don't really date much." He hesitated. "And I know that sometimes the older generation can be pretty harsh about people who don't fit their definition of success. That's it? That's everything you know about what I've been doing for the past 5 years? Should I know more?" There was something vulnerable in his voice, like he was suddenly realizing he might have been missing something important. Before I could answer, we were interrupted by the arrival of Maria, Danny's sister, along with 2 other younger cousins, Alex and Sophie. They approached our table with the kind of unified determination that suggested they'd been planning this intervention. "Okay, what's going on?" Maria demanded, pulling up a chair. "The adults are all acting super weird. Mom keeps making these cryptic comments about family dynamics, and Victoria actually snapped at me when I asked if everything was okay." Alex nodded vigorously, and Bradley keeps staring at his phone like he's waiting for some kind of important news. "It's creeping everyone out." Sophie, ever the direct one, looked straight at me. "Cass, are you in some kind of trouble? Because if you are, we want to help. The whole mysterious accommodation situation, the weird meetings with management, Victoria's attitude shift. Something's definitely going on." I looked around the table at these 4 faces, all showing genuine concern and affection. These were my actual family, the people who'd grown up with me, played with me, shared childhood secrets, and teenage dreams. They deserved better than the performance I'd been maintaining. "You're right that something's going on," I said carefully. "But I don't think I'm the one in trouble." "What does that mean? Danny asked. Before I could formulate an answer, Natalie appeared at our table, her expression tight with barely controlled anger. Cassandra. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I need to speak with you, privately. The younger cousins exchanged glances, clearly sensing the tension. Maria started to object, but I held up a hand. It's fine, I told them. We'll continue this conversation later. Natalie led me away from the restaurant toward a secluded seating area near the spa. Once we were alone, she whirled around to face me, her perfect composure completely gone. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, she hissed, but it stops now. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? I'm not sure what you mean. Don't play innocent with me. Victoria told me about your little performance. Yesterday. Some ridiculous story about owning this place. Financial documents, business presentations. It's pathetic, Cassandra. Even for you. I remained quiet, letting her continue. I mean, really? You think we're going to believe that you, of all people, secretly bought a $7 million resort? You can barely afford your rent. You work in restaurants. You drive a car that should have been scrapped years ago. Her voice was getting louder, attracting attention from other guests, but she didn't seem to care. And now you've got Victoria and Bradley so confused they don't know what to think. Victoria actually called Richard last night asking if there was some way to verify property ownership records. Can you believe that? You've got her so twisted around that she's actually fact-checking your fantasy. This was interesting. Victoria was doing research, trying to confirm what I'd told them. That meant some part of her believed it was possible, even if she didn't want to accept it. What exactly do you think I'm trying to accomplish? I asked quietly. Attention? Drama? Some pathetic attempt to make yourself seem important and successful, when everyone knows you're not. Natalie's eyes were blazing now. And it's working, isn't it? Suddenly, everyone's talking about mysterious Cassandra and her big secrets. Well, congratulations. You've successfully made yourself the center of attention for the first time in your sad little life. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Even if she didn't believe I owned the resort, even if she thought I was making it all up, the venom in her attack was completely disproportionate. This wasn't about facts or truth. This was about maintaining a hierarchy where I remained at the bottom. Are you finished? I asked when she paused for breath. Hardly. I want you to end this charade. Right now. Go to Victoria and Bradley, tell them you were lying, apologize for wasting their time, and stop trying to insert yourself into family business that doesn't concern you. And if I don't? Natalie's smile was cold and sharp. Then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are. The struggling waitress who was so desperate for attention that she invented an elaborate fantasy about being successful. Do you want your precious younger cousins to see you that way? Do you want them to know how pathetic you've become? 3. Threat was clear. Destroy my relationships with the family members who actually cared about me, or submit to continued humiliation and dismissal. I'll think about what you've said, I told her finally. You do that. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Cassandra, find somewhere else to eat your meals. It's embarrassing for the family to have you hanging around the resort restaurants looking like some kind of charity case. After she left, I sat alone in the seating area for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Natalie's reaction had been even more extreme than I'd expected. The idea that I might actually be successful, that I might have achieved something significant without their knowledge or approval, was so threatening to her worldview that she couldn't even consider it rationally. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Ms. Romano, I have some information you might find interesting. Could we meet in your office? My office. I liked the sound of that. I found Marcus waiting for me in the resort's administrative wing, along with James Patterson, the private investigator. I'd hired 6 months ago to conduct background research on my family's business dealings. James was a thin, intense man in his 50s who specialized in financial investigations. What did you find? I asked as we settled around the conference table. James opened a thick folder. Quite a bit, actually. The Romano Family Trust has some very interesting irregularities in its management over the past decade. He spread out several documents pointing to highlighted sections as he spoke. Your Aunt Victoria has been using trust funds for personal expenses that don't qualify under the original charter. Luxury travel, designer purchases, even part of the down payment on her current house. She's been categorizing these as family, business expenses, or administrative costs, but they don't meet the legal requirements for either. I studied the papers, seeing years of financial manipulation laid out in black and white. There's more, James continued. She's been denying legitimate distribution requests from qualified beneficiaries while approving questionable payments to family members who support her decisions. The pattern suggests she's been using the trust as her personal financial tool, rather than administering it according to its charter. Marcus leaned forward. What does this mean legally? It means she could be charged with fiduciary breach, possibly even embezzlement, depending on how a prosecutor wanted to handle it. At minimum, she could be removed as trustee and forced to make restitution. I absorbed this information slowly. Victoria's control over the family hadn't just been emotional manipulation. She'd been engaging in actual financial misconduct, using family money to fund her lifestyle while denying support to relatives who needed it. There's something else, James added, pulling out another set of documents. I did some digging into the family's business connections, particularly Bradley's real estate development company. He laid out financial records showing a pattern of deals between Bradley's company and the family trust, all approved by Victoria. These transactions appear to be conflicts of interest. Bradley's company has received several low-interest loans from the trust, and the trust has invested in his development projects at terms that heavily favor his business. Again, this might not be illegal, but it's certainly not in the best interest of the other trust beneficiaries. The picture was becoming clear. Victoria and Bradley had been using the family trust as their personal financial resource while simultaneously excluding family members like me, who might have questioned their decisions. How much money are we talking about? I asked. James consulted his notes. Over the past 5 years, approximately $2.3 million in questionable transactions. That's money that should have been distributed to beneficiaries or invested, more conservatively for family benefit. $2.3 million. More than enough to have made a real difference in my life after my parents died, when I was struggling to pay for their funeral expenses and dealing with medical debt. They'd left behind more than enough to have helped any number of family members who'd been excluded from Victoria's inner circle. What are the options for addressing this? I asked. You have several choices, James replied. You could report the irregularities to the appropriate authorities and let them investigate. You could hire attorneys to challenge Victoria's management in civil court. Or you could confront the family directly with the evidence and demand changes. I looked at the documents spread across the table, years of financial manipulation and self-dealing laid out in careful detail. Victoria had spent so much energy convincing everyone that I was the family failure, the one who couldn't manage money or make good decisions. Meanwhile, she'd been mismanaging family resources for her own benefit. I want copies of everything, I said finally, and I want a detailed analysis of what restitution would look like if these irregularities were corrected. Planning to confront them? Marcus asked. Planning to give them the opportunity to do the right thing, I replied, before I make this a legal matter. After James left, I walked back toward the main resort areas, my mind spinning with this new information. The financial misconduct added another layer to everything I'd already discovered about my family's treatment of me. It wasn't just emotional manipulation. It was actual theft of resources that should have been available to help family members in need. As I passed through the lobby, I noticed a small crowd gathered near the concierge desk. Several of my relatives were clustered around Isabella, who was maintaining her professional composure despite what looked like an increasingly heated conversation. I moved closer, staying far enough away to avoid being noticed, but close enough to hear what was being said. "We just want to understand the ownership situation," Uncle Frank was saying. "The Romano family has been coming here for years, and we'd like to establish a more formal relationship with management." "I understand your interest," Isabella replied smoothly. "However, ownership information is confidential unless specifically authorized for release by the property owner. But surely you can at least tell us if there have been any recent changes," Aunt Louise pressed. "Any new owners or management companies?" Victoria stepped forward, her voice sharp with frustration. "Look, we've heard some conflicting information about recent ownership changes, and we need to verify the facts. This is important for our family's future relationship with this resort. I'm sorry, but I cannot provide ownership details without proper authorization," Isabella maintained. "If you'd like to request a meeting with ownership representatives, I'd be happy to arrange that." "We already had that meeting," Bradley said grimly, "and we got more questions than answers." I could see the confusion and frustration in their faces. They wanted confirmation of what I'd told them, but they also couldn't quite bring themselves to believe it. The idea that poor Cassandra might actually own this place was so contrary to their assumptions about me that they needed external verification to accept it. Victoria noticed me standing near the lobby entrance and her expression hardened. She said something quietly to the others, and the group began to disperse, but not before I caught Uncle Frank's response. "Well, if it's true, everything changes everything." Yes, I thought to myself. Everything does change. That afternoon, I made a decision. Instead of waiting for tomorrow night's planned revelation, I was going to accelerate the timeline. The combination of Natalie's threats, the financial misconduct, evidence, and the family's obvious confusion meant it was time to bring everything into the open. I called a family meeting for that evening. Not the formal dinner I'd originally planned, but an impromptu gathering in the resort's private dining room. Through Marcus and Isabella, I sent invitations to every Romano family member at the resort. "Family meeting tonight at 7, the message read. "Important information to share about our family's future. Attendance requested by resort management." The phrasing was deliberately ambiguous. They would assume it was some kind of administrative meeting, possibly about booking policies or group rates. They wouldn't expect what was actually coming. As evening approached, I prepared myself for the most important conversation of my life. Not just revealing my ownership of the resort, but confronting decades of family dysfunction, financial misconduct, and emotional manipulation. Tonight, the Romano family was going to learn that their assumptions about power, success, and family hierarchy had been completely wrong. And I was going to give them the chance to decide what kind of family they wanted to be going forward. The private dining room was elegant and intimate, with a long mahogany table surrounded by comfortable chairs. I'd arranged for a simple dinner service, nothing too elaborate, but quality food and wine that would keep everyone comfortable while we talked. I arrived early and took my place at the head of the table, the same position I'd occupied during yesterday's meeting with Victoria and Bradley. Marcus had prepared materials for the presentation, including copies of the financial documents James had uncovered. But I'd decided to start with the resort ownership revelation before moving into the trust issues. At exactly 7 o'clock, the Romano family began filing into the dining room. Uncle Frank and Aunt Louise entered first, looking puzzled but curious. The younger cousins came next, Danny and Maria exchanging glances when they saw me already seated. Victoria and Bradley arrived together, both wearing expressions of grim determination. Natalie and Richard came last, with Natalie shooting me a look that could have melted steel. Once everyone was seated, I looked around the table at these people, who had shaped my entire life for better and worse. Some of them had shown me genuine love and kindness. Others had treated me with casual cruelty. All of them were about to learn truths that would change our family forever. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady and clear. I know this seems unusual, but there are some things you need to know about our family, about this resort, and about me that will affect all of our relationships going forward. The room was completely silent. Even Victoria, who usually couldn't resist interjecting her opinions, seemed to understand that something significant was about to happen. Some of you have heard rumors or partial information over the past couple of days, I continued. Tonight, I'm going to give you the complete truth about who I really am, what I've accomplished, and what I've discovered about our family's business dealings. I could see various reactions around the table. Danny and Maria looked intrigued. Uncle Frank seemed nervous. Victoria and Bradley appeared braced for conflict. Natalie was practically vibrating with suppressed anger. Let's start with the obvious question, I said, spreading my hands to encompass the elegant dining room around us. Who owns Pinehaven Mountain Resort? The silence stretched for several seconds before Danny finally spoke. I think we're all wondering that, he said quietly. I smiled at him, this cousin who had always treated me with kindness, even when others hadn't. I do, I said simply. I own this resort. I bought it 18 months ago for $7.2 million. Cash purchase. The explosion of voices was immediate and overwhelming. Everyone seemed to be talking at once, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to anger. I let the chaos continue for a moment before holding up my hand for silence. I know it's a lot to process, I said when they'd quieted down. And I know it contradicts everything you thought you knew about my life. But it's true, and I can prove it. This time, when I activated the wall screen and showed them the property documents, the financial records, and the business registration papers, they couldn't dismiss it as easily as Victoria and Bradley had tried to do yesterday. The evidence was too comprehensive, too detailed, too official to be fabricated. But how? Aunt Louise's voice was barely a whisper. How could you possibly afford something like this? I built a business, I replied, starting with the life insurance. Money from my parents' deaths, I invested in real estate, stocks, and various financial instruments. My company, Mountain Vista Properties, now manages over $50 million in assets. Uncle Frank's face had gone completely white. $50 million? My personal net worth is actually higher than that, but $50 million is what the business manages for various clients and investments. The second wave of shocked silence was different from the first. This wasn't just surprise. It was the sound of people realizing that their entire understanding of reality had been wrong. Why didn't you tell us? Maria asked, her voice small and confused. When would I have told you? I asked gently. When Victoria was explaining to everyone that I was too irresponsible to receive family trust distributions. When Bradley was complaining about having to support family members who couldn't get their lives together. When Natalie was suggesting that maybe I shouldn't come to family gatherings if I couldn't afford to participate at the same level as everyone else. Each name I mentioned seemed to shrink a little in their chair. You all made it very clear that you saw me as a failure, a burden, someone to be pitied or managed rather than respected. Why would I share my success with people who had already decided I was incapable of achieving it? Danny leaned forward, his expression pained. Cass, we never meant, didn't you? I interrupted, but not unkindly. Danny, you're one of the few people in this family who has always treated me with genuine respect and affection. But even you admitted that you thought I was struggling, barely making ends meet, unable to build a stable life. He nodded reluctantly. The truth is, I've been successful for years. While you all assumed I was failing, I was actually building something bigger than any of you imagined. And I did it without any help from the family trust, without financial support from relatives, without the connections and resources that have benefited most of you. I paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But there's more you need to know. It's not just about me being more successful than you realized. It's about how family resources have been managed, and how some of you have been taking advantage of others." Victoria's face went rigid. "Cassandra, I don't think this is the time or place." "Actually, this is exactly the time and place," I said firmly, "because this affects everyone in this room." I nodded to Marcus, who distributed copies of James Patterson's financial analysis to everyone at the table. "These documents show how the Romano family trust has been managed over the past decade," I explained as people began looking through the papers. "What you'll find is a pattern of misuse, conflicts of interest, and denial of legitimate distributions to qualified beneficiaries." The room erupted again, but this time the anger was directed at Victoria rather than at me. Uncle Frank was staring at the documents with growing outrage, while the younger cousins looked confused and hurt. "Victoria," Uncle Frank's voice was deadly quiet. "What is this about trust funds being used for personal expenses? And what are these loans to Bradley's company?" Aunt Louise added, her voice shaking. Victoria looked around the table, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. "This is a private family matter that should be discussed." "No," I said firmly. "This is a legal matter that affects everyone in this room, and it's time it was brought into the open." For the next hour, we went through the evidence methodically. The questionable transactions, the conflicts of interest, the denial of distributions to family members who needed them. With each revelation, Victoria's position became more untenable, and the anger in the room more palpable. Finally, when we'd covered all the financial irregularities, I stood up. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "Victoria will resign as trustee of the family trust, effective immediately. An independent trustee will be appointed to review all past transactions and determine appropriate restitution. Any family member who has been denied legitimate distributions will receive what they should have gotten, with interest." "And if I refuse?" Victoria asked, her voice barely audible. "Then I'll file a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office and let them investigate potential criminal charges. Fiduciary breach and embezzlement are serious crimes, Victoria." The fight went out of her completely. She slumped in her chair, looking older and smaller than I'd ever seen her. "There's one more thing," I continued. "From now on, respect in this family will be based on how we treat each other, not on assumptions about success or wealth. No more excluding family members from gatherings because of their perceived financial status. No more cruel comments about people's careers or life choices. No more using family resources to reward loyalty and punish independence." I looked around the table at each face, seeing a mix of shame, understanding, and hope. "I love this family," I said finally. "But I won't tolerate being treated as less than equal by people who have achieved less than I have while benefiting from resources I was denied. We can be better than we've been, but only if we all commit to treating each other with genuine respect and honesty." The silence that followed was different from all the others that evening. This was the silence of people recognizing truth and deciding what to do about it. Danny was the first to speak. "Cass," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not seeing who you really were, and I'm sorry for letting you be treated the way you were." One by one, the others began to apologize. Not everyone, and not with equal sincerity, but enough to give me hope that our family might actually be capable of change. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, I remained seated at the head of the table, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as we figured out how to rebuild family relationships on a foundation of honesty rather than assumptions. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged in the Romano family. Not as the charity case or the disappointing relative, but as an equal member with something valuable to contribute. The resort around us hummed with quiet activity, guests enjoying their evening, staff providing excellent service, all of it running smoothly under my ownership. In the morning, my family would wake up knowing that the person they'd tried to exclude from their circle was actually the one providing the luxury they'd been enjoying. It was a strange kind of justice, but it felt exactly right. The morning after the family meeting dawned gray and cold, with heavy clouds hanging low over the mountain peaks. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my private suite, watching the first snowflakes of the season drift down onto the resort grounds. The weather seemed fitting for what I knew would be a difficult day. My phone had been buzzing constantly since 6 a.m. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails from family members processing what they'd learned the night before. Most were apologetic, some confused, a few angry. But the most interesting communications were the ones that weren't coming through my phone. Marcus knocked on my door at 7:30, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Part admiration, part concern. "Ms. Romano, we have a situation developing," he said as I let him in. "Several of your family members have been making calls since early this morning. Phone calls to business associates, legal contacts, even some media connections." I poured coffee for both of us, gesturing for him to continue. "Your Aunt Victoria has been in contact with a law firm in Denver, apparently seeking advice about challenging the validity of your ownership of the resort. She's also called someone at the county assessor's office, trying to get copies of property transfer records." This didn't surprise me. Victoria had built her entire identity around being the family's financial authority. Having that authority, not just questioned but completely demolished in front of everyone, would drive her to desperate measures. "What about the others?" "Your cousin Bradley has been making calls to his business partners, apparently trying to verify your company's financial standing. He's also reached out to someone at the State Banking Commission." I sipped my coffee, thinking through the implications. Bradley was trying to confirm whether Mountain Vista Properties was legitimate, whether my claimed net worth was real. Part of him probably still hoped this was all an elaborate fiction that would eventually collapse. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Natalie has been very active on social media since dawn. She's been posting cryptic messages about family loyalty, truth, and people who manipulate situations for attention." He showed me the tablet, scrolling through a series of posts that painted a picture of someone having a very public emotional breakdown. The posts were carefully worded to avoid directly naming anyone, but the implications were clear. Someone in her family was lying about their success, creating drama, tearing the family apart with false claims. "She's building a narrative," I observed. "Trying to control the story before it gets away from her." It gets worse. She's tagged several other family members in these posts, and some of them are starting to engage. There's a whole conversation thread developing about family, values, and staying grounded in reality. I studied the social media conversation, watching my relatives take sides in real time. The younger cousins were mostly staying out of it, but some of the extended family members were clearly choosing camps. Team Victoria, defending traditional family hierarchy and questioning dramatic claims. Team Uncertainty, asking for more information before taking positions. What I didn't see was Team Cassandra. Yet. "There's something else you should know," Marcus said quietly. "We've had some unusual calls to the resort this morning. People claiming to be journalists, asking about the Romano family gathering and whether there have been any newsworthy developments." My blood chilled. Journalists? 3 different calls so far. One from a Denver business publication, one from a local lifestyle magazine, and one from someone who claimed to be working on a story about family business dynamics in the hospitality industry. Someone was actively shopping this story to the media. The question was who and what angle they were pursuing. Did any of them mention me specifically? Not by name, but they were asking about recent ownership changes, family meetings, and quote-unquote dramatic revelations that allegedly took place at the resort. I set down my coffee cup, my mind racing through possibilities. The smart money was on Natalie. who had the social media savvy and vindictive nature to turn this into a public relations war. But it could also be Victoria, trying to create external pressure that might force me to back down from my position. "Cancel all media inquiries," I told Marcus. "No comments, no confirmations, no acknowledgments that anything unusual has happened. If they persist, refer them to our legal team." "Already done. But, Ms. Romano, if this story gets out, it's going to be very difficult to control the narrative." He was right. The story of the poor relation who secretly owned the family reunion resort was exactly the kind of thing that would capture public attention. Add in the financial misconduct allegations, and it became a morality tale about power, family, and hidden wealth that media outlets would find irresistible. "We need to get ahead of this," I said. "Set up meetings with our legal team and the PR firm we have on retainer. If this is going public, I want to control how it goes public." After Marcus left, I took a long shower and dressed carefully in one of my best business suits. If today was going to be a battle, I wanted to look like someone who was prepared to win it. My first stop was the resort's business office, where I spent an hour reviewing contingency plans with my management team. If media attention became overwhelming, we had protocols for protecting guest privacy and maintaining normal operations. If legal challenges materialized, we had documentation ready to prove every aspect of my ownership and financial standing. Around 10 a.m., I received a call from James Patterson, the private investigator who'd uncovered the trust irregularities. "Ms. Romano, we have developments you need to know about," he said without preamble. "Your Aunt Victoria hired a competing investigation firm this morning. They're trying to dig up information about your business dealings, looking for anything that might discredit your claims." "What kind of information?" "Tax records, business licenses, client lists, transaction histories. They're basically trying to prove that either your company doesn't exist or that you've exaggerated your financial position." I wasn't worried about legitimate scrutiny of my business records. Everything was properly documented, legally compliant, and financially sound. But I was concerned about the escalation this represented. "There's more," James continued. "They've also hired someone to look into your personal background, educational records, employment history, previous addresses, even medical records if they can access them legally. They're trying to build a case that I'm unstable or dishonest. That would be my assessment. Classic character assassination strategy. If they can't disprove your claims directly, they'll try to destroy your credibility." This was war then, not just a family disagreement, but an active campaign to discredit and humiliate me. Victoria wasn't just trying to save face. She was trying to completely destroy my position and force me back into the subordinate role I'd occupied for years. "What do you recommend?" "Fight fire with fire. Let me expand my investigation into their business dealings. If they want to play dirty, we should make sure we have leverage." I considered this carefully. Escalating the conflict could make everything messier, more painful for everyone involved, but allowing Victoria and her allies to attack my character without response would be equally dangerous. "Do it," I said finally, "but stay within legal boundaries. I want to win this fight, but I want to win it cleanly." After ending the call, I walked down to the resort's main lobby, curious to see how the atmosphere had changed overnight. What I found was revealing. Several family members were clustered in different areas, having what appeared to be intense conversations. Uncle Frank and Aunt Louise were near the fireplace, speaking in low voices while occasionally glancing toward the elevators. Danny and Maria were at a corner table in the cafe, both looking troubled. Most telling, Victoria was, holding court near the concierge desk, surrounded by 3 other relatives I didn't recognize, all of them animated and clearly agitated. As I watched, Natalie emerged from the elevator and made a beeline for Victoria's group. Even from across the lobby, I could see the intensity of their conversation. Hands gesturing, heads nodding, papers being passed back and forth. They were organizing something. Isabella appeared at my elbow, moving with the discreet efficiency that made her so valuable. "Your aunt has been trying to book additional meeting rooms," she reported quietly. "She wants to hold what she's calling a family clarification session this afternoon. She's also asked about extending several family members' stays beyond the original checkout date." A family clarification session. Victoria was calling her own meeting, probably to present whatever ammunition her investigators had gathered and to rally support for her version of events. "Did you accommodate the request?" "I told her I'd need to check availability and get approval from resort ownership." Isabella's slight smile told me she'd enjoyed delivering that line. She became quite insistent that as a long-time guest, she should receive priority consideration. "What did you tell her?" "That all major booking decisions need to be approved by Ms. C. Romano personally." Perfect. Victoria was learning that her assumed authority over resort operations was just that, an assumption. Every demand she made, every attempt to control the situation, would run directly into the reality of my ownership. Around noon, Danny approached me as I was having lunch on the terrace. He looked exhausted, like he'd been awake all night processing everything that had happened. "Cass, can we talk privately?" he asked, sliding into the chair across from me. "There are things happening that I think you should know about." "I'm listening." "Mom and Dad had a long conversation with Victoria and Bradley this morning. They're talking about challenging everything you said last night. Not just the business stuff, but whether you're mentally stable enough to be making these kinds of claims." The words hit like a physical blow. They were trying to paint me as mentally ill, using the oldest and most effective way to discredit a woman who threatened male authority. "They're saying the stress of your parents' deaths, the pressure of trying to make it on your own, might have caused some kind of psychological break. That maybe you've convinced yourself these fantasies are real because reality was too painful to accept." I set down my fork, no longer hungry. "And what do your parents think?" Danny looked miserable. "They don't know what to think. They want to believe you, but the numbers seem so impossible. $50 million, Cass. They keep saying that if it were true, how could we not have known? How could you have hidden something that big?" "Because none of you ever asked," I said quietly. "Because you all made assumptions about my life and never bothered to check whether those assumptions were accurate. I know that's true, but they're also scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that if you really are that successful, it means they've been terrible to you for years. It means they've treated someone who was actually more accomplished than any of them like she was a charity case. The guilt is eating them alive." This was the psychological component I hadn't fully considered. For my family to accept that I was successful, they had to also accept that their treatment of me had been unjustified and cruel. It was easier to question my sanity than to confront their own behavior. "What about you?" I asked. "What do you think?" Danny was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountain vista. "I think you're the sanest person in our entire family," he said finally. "I think you saw what the rest of us were becoming and decided to build something better. And I think some people can't handle being proven wrong about something so fundamental." Before I could respond, Maria appeared at our table, moving with obvious urgency. "Cass, you need to see this," she said, holding out her phone. "It's already going viral." The screen showed a Facebook post from someone I didn't recognize, with several hundred shares already. But I recognized the photo immediately. It was a picture of me from last night's family meeting, obviously taken without my knowledge through the dining room windows. I was standing at the head of the table, gesturing toward the wall screen, with several family members visible in the background. The caption read, "Drama alert. Local woman claims to secretly own luxury resort where her family is staying. Multiple witnesses report she presented business documents and made wild claims about being worth millions. Family members are now questioning her mental state. More details to follow as this story develops. Maria, where did this come from? I don't know, but it's everywhere. Someone posted it in 3 different local Facebook groups, and people are sharing it like crazy. The comments are not good. I scrolled through the responses, seeing a mix of reactions. Some people were fascinated by the story, speculating about the truth and sharing their own family drama stories. Others were dismissive, calling it attention-seeking behavior or delusions of grandeur. A few seemed to recognize me or the resort, adding details that made the story more specific and more credible. This is just the beginning, Maria said quietly. Once the local news picks this up, it's going to explode. She was right. The story had all the elements that made for compelling local news: family drama, hidden wealth, dramatic revelations, and a photogenic setting. Within hours, it would probably be the lead story on every Denver news broadcast. My phone rang. James Patterson again. Ms. Romano, have you seen the social media posts about last night? Just now. Do we know who leaked the photo? I have people checking, but my guess is it was someone Victoria's team hired to document the meeting. They probably had a photographer positioned outside the dining room windows. Is that legal? Technically, yes, if they were on public property or common areas of the resort. The dining room windows faced the main grounds, so anyone could have taken that shot. I closed my eyes, feeling the situation spiraling beyond my control. What's our exposure here? Legally, minimal. The story doesn't make any false claims about you, and everything that happened at the meeting was factual. But from a PR standpoint, this could get messy fast. How messy? Depends on how the family responds. If they close ranks and support the narrative that you're having some kind of breakdown, it becomes a story about mental health and family concern. If they acknowledge the truth about your success, it becomes a story about hidden wealth and family reconciliation. After ending the call, I sat with Danny and Maria, all of us staring at my phone as the share count continued to climb. Within 2 hours, the story had spread beyond local Facebook groups to regional news blogs and business forums. By evening, it would probably reach traditional media outlets. What are you going to do? Danny asked. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Channel 7 News would like to schedule an interview regarding recent developments at Pinehaven Mountain Resort. Please call to arrange. Then another. Colorado Business Weekly interested in discussing your success story and family business dynamics. And another. Rocky Mountain Lifestyle Magazine wants to feature your resort ownership and entrepreneurial journey. The media circus was beginning. Within hours, I'd gone from a private person managing a family conflict to the subject of public speculation and news coverage. The choice was no longer whether to engage with the media, but how to engage with them. I'm going to tell the truth, I said finally. The whole truth, publicly and completely. If this is going to be a media story, it's going to be my media story. Danny nodded slowly. You're going to fight back. I'm going to set the record straight. There's a difference. That afternoon, while Victoria was holding her family clarification session in one of the resort's meeting rooms, I was on a conference call with my PR team, planning a comprehensive media strategy. We would provide documentation of my business success, proof of the resort ownership, and evidence of the family trust irregularities. Instead of allowing others to control the narrative, I would present the facts directly to the public. The war Victoria had started was about to become very public and very decisive. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Colorado would know exactly who Cassandra Romano was, what she'd accomplished, and how her family had treated her despite her success. The poor relation sleeping in her car was about to become the successful businesswoman who owned the resort. And there would be no going back from that revelation. As evening approached, I stood once again at the windows of my suite, watching the snow continue to fall on the resort grounds. Somewhere in the building below me, my family was probably still debating my mental state, my claims about success, and their own roles in years of emotional manipulation. Tomorrow, the entire state would be debating the same questions. But by then, the answers would be public record, documented, and undeniable. I pulled out my phone and called the producer at Channel 7 News. "This is Cassandra Romano," I said when he answered. "I understand you want to discuss recent developments at Pinehaven Mountain Resort. I'm ready to tell you everything." The battle for truth was about to go public, and I intended to win it decisively. The Channel 7 News interview was scheduled for 8 a.m. the following morning, to be conducted in the resort's main lobby with the spectacular mountain backdrop visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd spent most of the night preparing with my PR team, organizing documents, and practicing key talking points that would establish my credibility while maintaining dignity. At 7:30, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue blazer I'd chosen for the interview. Professional but approachable, successful but not ostentatious. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the struggling waitress my family had imagined I was. This was Cassandra Romano, CEO and resort owner, ready to tell her story to the world. Marcus met me in the hallway, carrying a leather portfolio with backup documentation. "The news crew is setting up in the lobby," he reported. "Security is managing the growing crowd of curious onlookers, and I've arranged for staff to maintain normal operations despite the attention." "Any word from the family this morning?" "Your Aunt Victoria checked out an hour ago, along with Bradley and Natalie. They left without speaking to anyone, but I understand they're planning to watch the interview from Denver." I wasn't surprised. Victoria had orchestrated the media attention as a weapon against me. But now that I was prepared to engage with it directly, she wanted distance from the inevitable fallout. "What about the others?" "Your Uncle Frank and Aunt Louise are staying for the interview. Danny and Maria as well. They said they want to support you publicly." This meant something. The family was dividing along predictable lines, with the financial manipulators retreating while the more genuine members chose to stand with me. It wasn't universal support, but it was enough to matter. The interview itself went better than I'd dared hope. Sarah Chen, the Channel 7 business reporter, had done her homework. She'd independently verified my company's registration, confirmed property ownership records, and even interviewed several Mountain Vista Properties clients who spoke positively about my business acumen and professional integrity. "Ms. Romano," Sarah began, "social media has been buzzing about dramatic revelations at your family reunion. Can you tell us what really happened?" I looked directly into the camera, speaking to the thousands of viewers who would see this story, but also to the family members I knew would be watching. For years, my relatives assumed I was struggling financially because I lived modestly and worked in restaurants while building my investment business. They made decisions about family, gatherings, financial support, and basic respect based on those assumptions, without ever asking about my actual circumstances. I paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. When I revealed that I'd actually built a successful company and owned this resort, some family members had difficulty accepting that reality. Instead of acknowledging their mistakes, they chose to question my mental health and spread rumors about my stability. Sarah leaned forward. "You're saying your family tried to discredit you rather than admit they'd misjudged your success?" "I'm saying that some people find it easier to attack someone's character than to examine their own behavior. The documentation of my business success is public record. The evidence of financial misconduct within our family trust is also documented. People can draw their own conclusions about which story is more credible." The interview continued for 20 minutes, covering my business background, the resort acquisition, and the family trust irregularities. I presented facts calmly and professionally, never attacking my relatives personally, but making it clear that their version of events was contradicted by substantial evidence. When Sarah asked about the photo of me sleeping in my car, I smiled slightly. It's ironic, isn't it? My family forced me to sleep in the parking lot of my own resort because they assumed I couldn't afford proper accommodations. It's a perfect metaphor for how assumptions about other people's lives can be completely wrong. The interview concluded with Sarah asking about my future plans for the resort and my relationship with my family. Pinehaven Mountain Resort will continue operating as a luxury destination that welcomes all guests with respect and dignity, I said. As for my family, I hope this experience will help all of us understand the importance of treating each other with honesty and kindness, regardless of assumptions about success or failure. By noon, the interview had been shared across multiple platforms and was trending on social media. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with viewers praising my composure and expressing outrage at my family's treatment of me. Several business publications reached out for follow-up interviews, and my phone was ringing constantly with congratulations from colleagues and clients. More importantly, the public support seemed to be having an effect on my family members. Danny called around 1 o'clock, his voice filled with emotion. "Cass, I just watched the interview. You were incredible. Professional, classy, and you didn't throw anyone under the bus even though you had every right to." "Thank you. That means a lot. I want you to know that Dad and I talked this morning. He's mortified about how the family has treated you. He's driving back to the resort right now because he wants to apologize in person." Similar calls came from Maria, Aunt Louise, and even some extended family members who had seen the interview and wanted to express their support. The tide of public opinion was clearly turning in my favor, and it was influencing how family members viewed the situation. But the most significant call came at 3 o'clock. Victoria's number appeared on my phone, and after a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Hello, Victoria." Cassandra. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it, stripped of the commanding authority she'd wielded for years. "I watched your interview." I waited, saying nothing. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is everything you said true? The business, the money, the resort ownership, all of it?" "Yes, every word." A long silence followed. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "Then I owe you the biggest apology of my life. We all do." "Victoria, no. Let me finish. I spent years telling myself I was protecting the family, making hard decisions about resources and support. But the truth is, I was protecting my own position. I was so afraid of losing control that I couldn't see what was really happening around me. I could hear her crying, something I'd never witnessed in all the years I'd known her. I convinced myself you were irresponsible, that you couldn't handle success, that you needed guidance and management. But you were building something extraordinary, while I was playing petty power games with family money. "It doesn't have to define our relationship going forward," I said quietly. "How can you say that? How can you even speak to me after what I've done?" "Because you're still my aunt. Because family means something, even when it's complicated and painful. And because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Victoria accepting full responsibility for her actions and promising to cooperate with the trust restructuring process. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Over the next few days, the story continued to generate attention, but the focus shifted from family drama to business success. Several entrepreneurship organizations invited me to speak about building wealth through strategic investing. The resort saw a surge in booking inquiries from people who wanted to experience the property that had become famous as the setting for such an unusual family revelation. More importantly, the family dynamics began to shift in fundamental ways. The younger generation, led by Danny and Maria, organized a proper family meeting to discuss how relationships would work going forward. They established new ground rules. No more assumptions about anyone's financial situation. No more exclusion based on perceived success or failure, and no more tolerance for manipulation or emotional abuse. Uncle Frank took the lead in hiring an independent trustee to review the family trust irregularities. Within a month, Victoria had been removed from her position, and restitution payments were being calculated for family members who had been denied legitimate distributions. The process was painful but necessary, establishing accountability for years of financial misconduct. Bradley initially resisted the changes, but when his business partners saw the public documentation of his conflicts of interest with the family trust, he faced pressure to settle the matter quickly and quietly. His attempts to challenge my business credentials had backfired spectacularly when my clients began publicly defending my professional reputation. Natalie took the longest to accept the new reality. She continued posting cryptic social media messages about family loyalty and truth, but with each passing day, her position became more isolated. Eventually, she deleted the posts and retreated from public comment entirely. The most gratifying development came 6 weeks after the interview aired. I received a handwritten letter from a woman in Phoenix who had seen the story and been inspired to confront her own family's financial manipulation. She had discovered that her brother had been mismanaging their mother's estate and using the whole revelation of my story as motivation to take legal action. Watching you stand up for yourself with such dignity gave me the courage to fight for what was right in my own family, she wrote. Thank you for showing that it's possible to demand respect without becoming bitter or cruel. Similar letters arrived from across the country, from people who had experienced family financial abuse, emotional manipulation, or simple dismissal of their achievements. The story had resonated far beyond Colorado, touching anyone who had ever been underestimated or misjudged by people who claimed to love them. 3 months after the family reunion, I hosted a different kind of gathering at Pinehaven Mountain Resort. Instead of the traditional Romano family event, this was a celebration of the new relationships we were building based on honesty and mutual respect. Danny and Maria had worked with me to plan an event that honored both our family history and our commitment to healthier dynamics. We invited not just the immediate family, but also the spouses, partners, and children who had been affected by years of toxic behavior. The focus was on healing, understanding, and moving forward together. Victoria attended, but in a much different role than she'd occupied in previous years. She was quieter, more thoughtful, clearly working to rebuild relationships rather than control them. During the weekend, she approached me privately. I've been thinking about what you said, about family meaning something even when it's complicated, she said. I want to earn back your trust, and everyone else's. I know it will. Take time, but I'm committed to doing the work. What does that look like to you? I asked. Therapy, for one thing. I need to understand why I felt such a need to control everyone around me. And I want to make amends, not just financial restitution, but actual relationship repair. She paused, looking out at the mountain vista that had become the backdrop for so many family moments, both painful and healing. I also want to ask if you'd consider letting me help with the resort operations, not as an owner or manager, but as someone who understands hospitality and wants to contribute something meaningful. The request surprised me. In what capacity? Event planning, maybe. Guest services. I have connections in the tourism industry that could benefit the business, and I think working for you, instead of trying to control you, might teach me something about respect and humility. It was an unexpected proposal, but one that felt right. Victoria had skills and experience that could genuinely help the resort, and giving her a role in my success might be more healing than continuing to keep her at a distance. We can try it, I said, but it has to be a real job, with real responsibilities and accountability. No special treatment because you're family. I wouldn't want it any other way. By the end of the weekend, the transformation in our family dynamics was visible to everyone. Conversations were more genuine, laughter came more easily, and there was a sense of optimism that hadn't existed in years. The younger generation was particularly engaged. excited about the possibility of having a family they could actually be proud of. On the final evening, I stood once again at the windows of my suite, but this time I wasn't alone. Danny and Maria were with me, along with several of the younger cousins, all of us reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. "You know what's funny?" Maria said, holding a glass of wine and looking out at the resort grounds. "All those years, we thought you were the family problem, the one who couldn't get it together, who needed help and guidance. And instead, you were the family solution," Danny added. "You were the one who had the courage to build something real, and then the courage to demand that we all do better." I smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. From sleeping in my car in the parking lot, to standing in my own resort, surrounded by family members who finally saw me for who I really was. "The best part isn't the money or the business success," I said. "It's having relationships based on truth instead of assumptions. It's knowing that we can disagree or have problems without anyone having to sleep in their car." Everyone laughed, but there was understanding beneath the humor. We'd learned that family love without respect was just another form of control, and that real relationships required the courage to see each other clearly, even when that clarity was uncomfortable. As the evening wound down and everyone prepared to leave the next morning, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement about future family gatherings. Not because they would be perfect or free from conflict, but because they would be honest. The Romano family reunion had become something entirely different from what Victoria had planned. Instead of a gathering designed to reinforce existing hierarchies and power structures, it had become a catalyst for transformation. The resort that had been the setting for so much family pain had become the foundation for family healing. Months later, as I reviewed the resort's financial statements and planned expansion projects, I often thought about that night sleeping in my Honda Civic. It had been the lowest point of my relationship with my family, but it had also been the moment that made everything else possible. Sometimes you have to be willing to sleep in the parking lot before you can reveal that you own the entire resort. The business continued to thrive. My relationships with most family members grew stronger, and the story of the Romano family reunion became a cautionary tale about assumptions, power, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity regardless of their perceived status. But more than anything, it became a story about the transformative power of truth and the healing that becomes possible when people choose honesty over comfort, respect over control, and love over fear. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.